From the outside, Kamikaze Chris looked like a brave driver who could do anything on the streets. Even though he was determined to win, street racing isn't just about speed. It's a dangerous game where even the best drivers can't always avoid bad luck. It looked like Chris had made his mark on the world, but then something terrible happened and turned his life upside down in an instant. What did he really do, and where does this leave him? This is the sad story of Kamikaze Chris and the terrible event that changed everything. Chris isn't the type of person most people would think of as a street racing superstar. He drives that scary flat black El Camino on Street Outlaws. He certainly wasn't expected to make it, but he always manages to surprise everyone. The thing is, it was never part of a big plan. He went down this path because it was meant to be taken by him. For Chris, being the outsider is all in his blood. Chris didn't have much as a child because he grew up in a poor neighborhood in Oklahoma City. He said that his family wasn't just having a hard time, they were completely broke. Not the kind of broke where money is tight, but the kind of broke where hand-me-down clothes weren't just used, they were thin, dirty, and past their best. It was up to him to figure out what else he wanted besides the basics. And racing was the only thing that Chris cared about, but not cars, at least not at first. Chris started with dirt bikes, and if you ask him why, he'll tell you he's not necessarily a car guy, he's a race guy. If it's got wheels, he'll race it, a dirt bike, a shopping cart, probably even a lawnmower if you put one in front of him. By the time he was 3, he was already on a motorcycle and he never looked back. In order to keep his bike going, he did all sorts of weird jobs while other kids his age played in the park. He lined up at the starting gate twice a week and raced against riders who were almost twice his age. It didn't bother him. He was driven to win, loved speed, and worked hard, which made him stand out. It was his dad, a great drag boat driver, who taught him to work hard. You break it, you fix it. Chris loved that rule. To get money for his next ride, he mowed fields, cut down trees, and pumped gas. Every step up from a BMX bike to his first dirt bike he worked for. He was unstoppable once he tried real competition. And around that time he wasn't just racing. He was also helping other people get faster, especially with their cars. Kamikaze and Justin Big Chief Shearer met for the first time in high school. It was like two puzzle pieces clicked into place. They both loved cars and were very competitive. Neither one ever gave up when they were challenged. Kamikaze was the one who first called Big Chief by that now iconic name. But their friendship wasn't just based on speed, it was formed in the late-night chaos of the garage. Kamikaze was the one who worked on Big Chief's 1972 Pontiac Le Mans, also known as the Crow, in the garage every night. He wasn't just the guy who talked and drove fast. And to them it wasn't just a car, it was the foundation of their friendship, the machine they built with their own hands, one late-night fix at a time. That hands-on experience set Kamikaze on his own path. First he picked up a Chevy LUV with a small block. Then came a Blazer, also a small block. And eventually, an A-body Chevelle. That Chevelle though was something else, a 71 covered in a loud emerald green paint job that looked like it belonged on a base boat. It wasn't pretty, but it had attitude and was fast, a real roady piece of machinery that was running nines and tearing up the streets. The game never ends though, because the cars come and go. A small group of OKC racers who weren't just there to cruise stayed close to Kamikaze. They were out to win. A lot of guys went just to hang out and show off their rides. Kamikaze, Big Chief, Dave Comto, and the rest of their crew, on the other hand, took racing very seriously. That service was clear in the way Kamikaze drove. To win, he was willing to push the car down the road if it meant that. He wasn't wild, he was measured, but he pushed harder than most, always riding that fine line between control and chaos. That's where the nickname Kamikaze came from. He had a way of making even the wildest events look easy. To him, driving was pure reflex. While some people needed a drink to relax or distractions to escape, Kamikaze found his peace at full speed, inches from disaster. That's where he thrived, the rush, the edge, the pure energy of knowing he was pushing both himself and his car to the absolute limit. That was what made him feel alive, and it wasn't long before that attitude got him noticed. When he joined Street Outlaws in its third season, he brought that raw, no-holds-barred energy to the screen. Many people became interested in drag racing after the show, and Kamikaze Chris became one of the most well-known drivers in the country. He was now the proud owner of what might be the game's most famous El Camino. The El Camino used to belong to Chris's childhood friend Tyler Flip pretty before Chris got it. For some reason everyone called it the Frankenstein because it was made from old parts from their friends' cars that were updated. It made a name for itself anyway. Everyone talked about Flip's car when he showed up in the first season of Street Outlaws. It was annoying, loud, and just plain silly. The theories about how it was held together only made the story more interesting. Those zoomy headers shot nitrous fireballs right out of the bumpers. Sealant, JB Weld, duct tape, and enough Bondo to fill a swimming pool were said to have been used to fix it. And when Flip pulled up to get his prize, it hurt even more. It was a mess, but it was quick. Friends of Flip's for a long time, Justin Big Chief Shearer and Chris were the only ones who should have the car after Flip died. No second guessing, no hesitation. The car had been sitting under a tarp for over a year, gathering dust, waiting for the right hands to bring it back to life. And when Chris finally turned the key, the engine didn't just start, it roared as if it had been waiting for him all along. But a car like that wasn't just going to come out of retirement quietly. On its first real drive, one of the rear brakes locked up and caught fire, and that was just the start. Before long, Chris had broken it so badly that it needed a full rebuild. That's when he struck a deal to drop in a friend's already built 582 engine. Chris had always built his own engine, so taking someone else's work made him mad. He was right when he thought that 582 would turn into a nightmare. They had to rebuild 13 times in one season. It was like being in charge of a funny car team. Over and over, race, repair, blow it up, and rebuild. It was enough to break anyone. But that's just part of the game when you're after speed. Chris was sick of the headaches and ready to move on. He made the call. He used his funds to work with Graham Jones at Fast Times Motorworks to make a strong 632 made of aluminum that had 4 steps of nitrous. Besides that, he and his friend Les worked on a back half chassis change in the workshop. What is the goal? It's easy: get back on OKC's top 10 list. His name was back on the list by the summer of 2017 when he won races and made himself known. There was still something wrong though. He couldn't settle because the car wasn't running the way he wanted it to. There were both new and used parts in the engine under the hood. They were all put together with one goal in mind: to go fast. In Arizona, Conca Racing Engines put together the engine with help from Wisco for the spinning system and Crower and Pack for the valve train. After making the change, they used electronic fuel injection with parts from fuel injector development and the Haltech EFI system that set the rules. Because 4 stages wasn't enough, that same Haltech setup also ran the El Camino's 6-stage nitrous system. With all that power, getting traction was always hard. It was a waste of horsepower if the car wasn't set up right. It wasn't going fast enough with the stock front end, so AutoFit Race Cars in Maryland made a new one out of chromoly tubes, and Chris and Les put it together in the garage. They also pulled out the radiator to save weight while they were at it. The engine was no longer cooled by air but by ice water pumped from a tank in the back. With QA1 adjustable coilovers and pack springs at all 4 corners, the suspension was fine-tuned to give the car the right amount of control and power. 4.0 mini aggression and power went straight to a Moser 9-inch rear end through a Power Glide gearbox. The original 4-link setup was left alone. Even though it had been updated, the car still had the soul of a G-body. It was still a little unexpected and wild, which was just the way Chris preferred it. Even with all the changes, there were still some things that couldn't be altered. Chris said that the driveshaft alone was 62 inches long and the El Camino stock wheelbase was 117 inches long. 5 inches, which isn't great for a race car. Because of where the cab was placed, it felt like a truck even though it was a car, so moving everything back to make the weight distribution better wasn't an option. It came up 29. 5x10, 5 Hoosier slicks which did their best to grip the track, but each pass was still exciting, which was part of the fun. Chris was fine as long as he wasn't on fire. Racing isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Every bolt, every dent, every late night in the garage tells a story of sacrifice. That car isn't just a machine, it's built from busted knuckles, sleepless nights, and every spare dollar he could find, sometimes even the ones he couldn't. By day he runs a small heating and air conditioning business. By night, long after the world has gone to sleep, he's in the shed cleaning the Lexan windows, checking spark plugs, setting in the tires, and double-checking the brakes. He doesn't have the option of throwing money at problems, so he makes sure nothing is left to chance. Guys like him, working class, self-funded, running a car built in a home garage, aren't supposed to go toe-to-toe with the big names, and yet he does. Running races has cost him a lot of money more than once. He's been dead broke while competing in this very show. But that label of underdog, that's not a trick, that's just the truth. That's what it takes to build, race, and win with an El Camino, he'll tell you himself. He's stubborn and proud. He doesn't do it by himself, of course. A great driver needs a team to help them win. Companies like Haltech, Speedmaster, and Wolf Aircraft Products help him stay in the race. At its core, though, this car shows what love, pride, and unwavering determination can do when money isn't enough. And if you think this kind of racing is out of reach, Chris would tell you otherwise. Anyone who is ready to spend time, money, and heart could make a car like his. But here's the difference: most people pause before diving into something this powerful. Chris never did. It's always been all or nothing for him. He tried to fight that part of himself for years, but now he's accepted it. There's no middle ground, either he makes it big or fails miserably. And if you know anything about racing, you know that's how you have to think to win. But he had no idea that the car that had made him so successful was about to ruin his life. So street racing has never been the healthiest or easiest thing to do, but it's still one of the most exciting sports for people who love speed. Fans of Street Outlaws and its spin-offs understand the rush, the raw power of high-performance machines, the tension at the starting line, and the split-second choices that can mean the difference between success and disaster. Crashes are an unavoidable part of the sport. No matter how often they happen, it's always shocking how quickly a finely tuned race car can go from peak performance to a twisted wreck. Chris Kamikaze and his famous 1981 Chevy El Camino know this better than most. It was hard for Kamikaze Chris to learn how harsh street racing can be in July 2020 when he was shooting Street Outlaws. His El Camino was totaled. It wasn't just a small scratch or dent on the bumper. It was almost impossible to save the frame, axles, engine, turbochargers, and other parts. A few parts like the shifter, the rear housing, and the parachute lever could still be used. Chris told the story on his YouTube account Kamikaze Life after the fact. The Elko was already acting up that day. The sensor for the drive shaft was giving him trouble and he wasn't really in the mood to race. But when another car threw out a dare, he just couldn't say no. One race later, and his beloved El Camino was nothing but bent metal. Losing that car wasn't just about money or the countless hours he'd spent making it. That Elko was his favorite car and one he had a lot of memories with. Seeing it destroyed was an emotional gut punch, the end of an era. But if there's one thing about Kamikaze Chris, it's that he doesn't back down. This crash wasn't the end of his racing career, it was just another test. He was ready to face it head on, like a real racer. He chose to do something crazy for his big comeback. He put a bunch of broken El Camino parts on eBay. The Weld racing wheels, Mickey Thompson tires, and TBM brake rotors that were on the passenger side of the car were ripped off right in front of Discovery Channel's cameras. He signed them, which made things even better. The sale became very famous very quickly. With 8 days left, the number of bids jumped over 100 and reached an amazing $10,600. But then Chris raised the stakes. If the sale hit $25,000, he vowed to personally cook and serve the winner a steak dinner live on Facebook while wearing his race suit. The bold move inspired fans and they eagerly accepted the challenge. Broken down car parts aren't usually worth much, but these weren't just any old. They were historical pieces of racing, and for Street Outlaws fans that meant something. Chris got more than 100 orders in just 1 week. He used the money from those sales to go right into building his next project, a fast C5 Corvette. This new car carried a familiar presence, the muscular stance, the deep gloss of its black paint. It looked like the El Camino was born again, and in many ways it was. From the wreckage, Chris salvaged the transmission, engine, and drivetrain, meticulously rebuilding each component before transplanting them into the Corvette. The Elco may have been lost to the flames, but thanks to Chris, its spirit never truly died. Kamikaze Chris also took his TV fame and ran with it, starting Kamikaze Motorsports, an online store packed with merch and die-cast models of his famous El Camino. Not only that, but he also has a YouTube account called Kamikaze Life, where he shows people his daily life and goes on crazy road trips. Since it began in 2020, it has gained over 70,000 members very quickly. But racing is still the most important thing to him, even with all of these other things he does. Fans were shocked when he seemed to disappear from Street Outlaws. No big explanation, no farewell, just gone. Naturally, stories started flying. Had he been fired? Did he quit? Was he done with racing? Chris finally broke his quiet on Facebook in July, letting fans know he wouldn't be in the 6th season of No Prep Kings. He didn't say why he wasn't there though, so fans are left with more questions than answers. His quiet didn't put an end to the rumors, instead it made them stronger and led to even more ideas about why he left. But despite all the talk, one thing stays certain: Kamikaze Chris has never stepped away from the racing world. He is still the best on the streets of Oklahoma and in no prep games. His attention is now on his C5 Corvette, a car that shows he has no plans to slow down. Kamikaze Chris is still a strong force, moving forward with unwavering determination no matter what happens. Fans have seen him at his best and worst, but one thing has always stayed the same: he never backs down from a challenge. His journey is far from over, both on and off screen. He still has a long way to go.